And the whispers are those voices telling us what is the right thing to do and represents the good in life. The bricks are the bad things that we go through in life. And everybody at some point in time or another does go through some bad things in life. All right. Some worse than others, but life is not, as we say, it's not a straight line. It's not, there are many, many bumps in the roads. Now, the reason I asked you to be on the show is because after I read your story, I knew that there were people in my audience who were going through the same things that you had gone through. They have been hit with brick after brick, much like what you had gone through, and they needed to hear and to know that they could get through the trials and tribulations the same way that you did. They needed to know that their whispers were out there that could help save them. Now, in your life, you have had a major brick thrown at you, as we know. Now, let me just ask you a couple of questions before we get started, actually. How many kids did you have at the time?
Four kids.
You had 4 kids. And how old were they?
At the time, boy, my daughter must have been 14, something like that. Ethan would have been 7 maybe, and Wyatt would have been 4 years old, 5 maybe. I'd have to go back and do the math, but they were quite young. I mean, this was 8 years ago. So
right. And Mitchell was?
He was 10, coming on 11.
Okay, so he was second.
He was third. I have my daughter Laura, Ashley, Ethan, then Mitchell, and then Wyatt. Yeah.
Okay. And how old were you and your wife when this happened?
Oh, wow. This is math I don't even think about. Probably, let's see, we would have been in our mid 30s.
Mid 30s.
Yeah.
Wow.
I would have been 39. Natalie, my wife, would have been, 36.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny because I remember when my dad, believe it or not, I remember when my dad turned 39, because it was, my mom wanted to take the family and move to Israel. Mm-hmm. And my dad was in business for himself, and he was doing very, very well. We were definitely upper middle class. And my mom was a very strong woman. And she said, listen, we're going. And my dad goes like, she says, are you coming or not? And my dad, it was funny because my dad spoke to his accountant, and his accountant looked at him like he's crazy. He goes, what are you, nuts? You're giving all this up for what? I mean, what's in Israel? But my mom was adamant. She wanted to go. And that's why I remember that, my dad was 39 years old at the time when we moved. So it's just funny. It's, ironic that you were 39 at the time. Okay. So you had 39, 36. All right. So now can you take us back and tell us, give us the story. Tell us what happened. Tell us how you managed what you were going through.
Yeah, sure. You bet. And maybe I can just do a few clicks back in time to the moment I met my wife. It was just a really deep connection that we had. I think when we dated, we never went to a movie. We never really did anything but just talk for hours and hours and hours. And then, fast forward a little while, and we got married, and we had our first and second child. And then Mitchell comes in to our life, our third child. And I'll never forget the moment I saw him. I had this distinct impression in the delivery room that something wasn't right. Although he appeared healthy, there were all the signs and signals. He was a healthy baby. I had a feeling that something wasn't right. And then for the next few years, 4 years, in fact, 3 years, I had this recurring impression that this little boy wasn't going to live a full life. And I remember telling my father-in-law and others close to me this feeling I had, and they thought, oh, you're just crazy. You just quit being weird and go back to living. And I thought, well, I get it. This is a feeling I had. And so when Mitch was 3 coming on 4, his aunt, Natalie's sister, was a pediatric physical therapist, started to detect little signals that Mitchell wasn't on par with all the other children his age. So a little behind in some of his critical milestones. Incidentally, she had experience with children with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, the same muscle wasting disease. So she was starting to see these things that we didn't have the eyes to see at the time. So we take him into the neurologist, and they do some tests. And I said, hey, I'm kind of busy today. Can you just call me? I just thought it was something tiny, And Natalie says, no, they said you need to be here. So I thought, this is serious. I run over to the I think it was Radio Shack at the time or something. And I grabbed a little recording device and I brought it in and I asked the doctor if I could record the meeting. And that's when we got this revelation that basically our boy had Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And I had to ask her like 3 times to describe what the disease was because I couldn't understand it. My head, it was just so overwhelmed with instantaneous grief and worry and doubt. And then began the journey. This little, almost 4-year-old boy has diagnosed with this muscle wasting disease, and we just fell into like almost a little chasm of grief instantaneously, wondering what the meaning and future of our life would be.
Just
So,
quick
yeah,
question.
yeah.
Is that would that be something like ALS?
It's a great question. They manifest fairly similarly to ALS, except the cause is different and it happens much earlier with little children. So ALS is also muscular, degeneration or deterioration.
Right.
So is Duchenne. The little boys, little kid, mostly boys get it. Almost 98% of all children affected. It's usually an X-linked defect,
Wow.
and so these little children outpace the disease. They grow so fast that you can't really tell it's happening until they turn about 10. And that's when the disease starts to outpace the growth of the body. And that's when you start seeing these children fall down faster, have a hard time getting up off the ground. And by their teens, they can't breathe. Late teens, they usually are on some kind of breathing device at night. They can't lift the spoon to feed themselves. So it happens really rapidly. So we saw
I'm
all
sorry.
of that.
I'm sorry
Go
for
ahead.
stopping you. Please. No, no. I'm sorry for stopping you in the middle of the story. Go ahead.
No, it's good. So yeah, we immediately put our house on the market to sell it, and we wanted to build a home that would better accommodate him. And then, we thought we would be okay for a little while. And sure enough, Mitch seemed to do really, really well until he was just before his 10th birthday. We went in to get a routine echocardiogram to check on the health of his heart. That's one of the early benchmarks. They want to start looking at it about the age 10. And they saw that Mitch had some heart failure. And they said, well, let's get him on some medicine. Let's see what we can do to help him. And so for the next 9 months, Mitch was on some pretty aggressive medications, and it did absolutely nothing to help him. And then we learned in November that he needed a heart transplant. We petitioned for it. We got denied. And then just a few months later, we lost him.
Wait, whoa. Stop, slow down. First of all, was your sister-in-law involved in the entire process all the way through? Or was she just like in the beginning told you what it was and then you dealt with doctors and whatever? Was she a part of this?
I love that question. Yes. In fact, this Points of Light project I'm doing, her journey that intersected with us happened decades before we even had a baby, where she began to follow this path in her life that got her prepared to really help our boy, help identify, yes, the diagnosis. She was able to get us in front of somebody to get a clear diagnosis. And then from that moment on, she became kind of a second mom to Mitch. And she loved him and cared for him and came over to help my wife and our family and became just a really tender blessing in our life. So yeah, she was with us every step of the way.
Wow. That must have been comforting as well. Knowing, I know that my daughter's an OBGYN. One of my daughters is my older daughter is an OBGYN. And when my second daughter was pregnant, my daughter was there every step of the way, because this is what she does,
Yeah.
So that was kind of, that was a great feeling, to know that you've got somebody on your side that, they're going to cut through all the BS, whatever it is. And they're going to tell you, they're going to give you the straight poop and, and they're going to tell you, hey, this is what you need to do. They're going to be your advocate, basically.
100%.
So that was really great. I'm very, very happy for you that you had that.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happened? So he's 10, 11 and heart transplant. Why did they deny the heart transplant?
Well, they call it a contraindication, which is basically a pre-existing condition that says that even if we fixed it, he wouldn't survive. So we'll give the heart to someone else that has a better shot at living. The decision not to give him a heart was sort of based on antiquated ideals on transplant. Mitch reasonably had at least another 10, 11 years of vitality. with, the advent of other assist devices, he could have lived long enough to merit the heart transplant, but they denied it. And it was a real blow. It was a real setback. We had hoped that we could buy him some more time. But, even then, the body's inability to create these proteins called dystrophin that would actually repair muscle, that new heart would also succumb to Duchenne.
Uh-huh. So, but that must have been tough. I mean, at that point in time, you not knowing, what lays ahead, or what, you're only looking at, you say, hey, this heart can help my son, right? And they say, sorry, that must have been devastating. How did your wife take to this? What was she going through? How was her, reaction to this whole thing?
Man, whenever I want to look at a symbol of strength, I look at my wife. She is the strongest human I know. And I just saw her time and again hit these catastrophic denials of, more life for our son. And she would rise like a mother lioness to defend her son and do anything she could to pave the way for the best possible life for him. We not only got denied the heart transplant, but we were also looking at an LVAD, which is a left ventricular assist device. It's something they implant to help the heart stay regular. And vital, that would be the next best step for Mitch. And he was just a hair too small for the existing LVADs. So we just missed that window by 6 months or a year. Otherwise, it just, it would have fit in his chest cavity and could have been another means by which he could have lived. But Natalie was just always looking for solutions and had a really strong demeanor around our son so as not to scare him, which was really beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, what about your other kids at the time? How did they react? What was their reaction to Mitch? If you can tell us, if you know.
No, yeah, they knew what was going on. Our very youngest boy was quite young, so we tried to manage information so he wouldn't just blurt things out, not recognizing that it might be frightening to Mitch.
Right.
Mitch knew he was on a collision course with Duchenne. My two older children also knew it, but what they did is just tried to help him with whatever strength he did have, because Mitch wasn't, he wasn't an able-bodied regular child. He needed help getting up off the floor. My son Ethan would just fall on the floor and let little Mitch kind of smother him and wrestle him and beat him. Even though Ethan had a lot more muscle, he would just let his brother win for a minute, and that made Mitch feel really good. So they did all they could to just help Mitch have a regular life.
Wow.
Yeah.
And your daughter, I can just picture it, like she mothering him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Is that correct?
Very, very correct. I have such a tender photo, in fact, of the night Mitch passed away, of Natalie and Laura Ashley, my daughter, sitting at the edge of the bed, holding Mitchell's hand as if to comfort what remained, and she loved him so much and did all she could to help Mitch feel safe.
Now, so my understanding is that Mitch passed at home.
Yes.
And was that did he ever wind up in the hospital? Did he have stays in the hospital? I'm sure he must have. No.
Well, great question, and I know I've been fast forwarding through things, but
that's okay. That's what this podcast is all about. We don't care. We jump around. We just want to get the information as best we could. So and we try and make our guests feel comfortable.
Well, thank you. And so in November, he was denied a heart transplant. In January, on the 2nd or 3rd, he had an MRI, which indicated his heart was just at the ejection fraction, the speed with which the heart pumps blood out of the body was at 5%. And that's, 0 is catastrophic. Most people are put on hospice at 25%. So he was at 5%. So we had a few weeks at home where he had a few little touches of, like, he'd call me at night when I was home working downstairs, and he'd say, "Dad, my heart feels funny." And I'd run upstairs and I'd come in his room and he was just listless. And I would just pick him up and hold him. And I'm like, "Not now, not now, not yet." And just love him. And he'd kind of come to. So one morning he was really sick, throwing up. And so we call the hospital and we're saying, "Hey, something's wrong." And they're like, "Oh, it's just the flu." And we're like, you get a table ready because we're coming right now. And so we raced down to the hospital, and they checked him out, and he was about to go. And so they rushed him up to the cardiac intensive care unit. He stayed there for about a week. And that's when we realized, the doctor came after doing about 10 hours of like tests and things and confirming things. He comes back and with tears in his eyes, pulls Natalie and I in the hallway, and he says, "You have days left with your little boy." And he says, "If I were you, I would run home as fast as you can and love this boy with all you've got." And so we decided to stay for a few days so they could kind of stabilize him. And we did just that. We took him home in a little less than a week. And then we had 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks with Mitch at home, where we were able to just love him the best we could. There's this interesting thing that happens when you come home from the hospital. They call it a rebound, where, for a minute, for the first week, we thought, oh, his vitals are picking up. This was just a nightmare. All the doctors were wrong. But that was just Mitch kind of coming back with kind of new energy. But then the heart failure just started to take over after week 2. So,
I've noticed, in general, and I saw this with my dad, that people that are, basically terminal, okay, very often right before they go, they'll get like better.
yeah.
I remember my parents were living in Israel. I have a brother who lives there, and it was a Wednesday or a Thursday. I don't remember. And I called my brother and I said, how's dad doing? And he goes, "Oh, dad, he's picking up. They changed his medication. He's looking better. He's more responsive." I said, "Do I need to get on a plane and come?" And he goes, "No, he's fine. He's getting better." And on Saturday he died,
Mm,
you know?
I'm sorry.
So it was like, it was just, look, he lived, thank God. Look, he was 86 when he died. So he did live a full life. I mean, I was sad that I didn't have a chance to say goodbye to him. Um, but just tell us now, just give us that one last piece. You wrote so beautifully about that last hour or last minutes that you had with Mitch. Can you just go back to that, please, and give us a little bit of that? I know it's going to be hard for you, but I need to hear it.
Yeah, you bet. So the night Mitchell passed away, we had indicators from our, just his signals that he wasn't going to come back. And he was in a state of almost coma. He could barely squeeze our hands. That evening, as the sun was setting, we'd say, "Mitch, are you there? Can you hear us?" And he would gently squeeze our hand to say, "I'm here, Mom and Dad, I'm here." And by evening, his room started to feel like a train station. Like, and I don't mean to get weird or wooey here, but something happened. And I felt like, the time was really near, and that his whatever he is, his soul was going to move on. And so it just became a really sacred space for that few hours. Everyone kind of went to bed, and my wife and I laid on mattresses right next to Mitchell's bed. We did that for the last week because we didn't want him to wake up and be afraid and us not be there. And my wife got up and started to administer some medicine at a little after midnight, and his body felt cold, and she turned over and called my name. Oh, actually, let me back up. A really sacred thing happened before he passed. I had this feeling. I had dozed off into a deep sleep. I was really, really tired. And I remember having this feeling like I was being nudged, and I instantly awoke, and it just said, this thought to my mind said, "Tuck Mitch in," because that's what I did every night. I would tuck him in. So I go up and I whispered in his ear. I pulled his blanket up over his chest to keep him warm. And his little puppy Marley was just a brand new few-week-old puppy, was curled around his head as if to comfort Mitch. I have pictures of it. It's so beautiful, so sacred. And I whispered in my son's ear and I said, "Mitch, I know you're tired. I love you. Mom and I are so, so proud of you." I remember telling him, whispering, "I want to be like you when I grow up." And I mean that. And I just said, "It's okay. Like, you can go. We love you. We're not disappointed. We were so proud of you." And I just gave him permission that when he felt like he needed to go, he could go. And I go back to bed. And maybe 30 minutes later, my wife, I hear her name, and it felt like 1,000 nuclear bombs blew off right above me. And I just instantly darted out of bed, and she had this look on her face. He's gone. And I ran over, and it was really, really hard to see him. And they say that's what happens with kids is they they wait till mom and dad leaves the room. Even though they appear unconscious, they wait because they don't want to disappoint us or make us sad. And I think that's what Mitchie was doing. He was hanging on, but he knew he was okay. We loved him. We were proud of him. And so, we had that moment. And I remember for that rest of that evening, in the middle of the night, having this feeling as though the heavens were black. Where is God in all of this? I thought. And I wasn't so, I guess, naive as to think I would be the only human exception to suffering that happens all around me on the news, So I was just thinking, where are you? Can I just feel something? And I had this distinct feeling that these little points of light were all around me. If I just looked upward, metaphorically, heavenward, whatever, and began to recognize the little tiny blessings that were all around us all the time from the beginning of time. And all I needed to do was just take a moment, let my spiritual eyes adjust to that new darkness. And I could start to see these little tender mercies, these little points of light that would be like constellations, so that I could look upward and go, you know what, this is the hardest thing I've ever experienced, but I know we're not alone, that things happen in an order and a sequence that often only in retrospect do we make sense of it. And I'm going a little further than what I wrote, but that essay is called Nightfall. And it's about this learning to see in the dark and recognize those tiny, faint blessings, those good things that happen from God, from others. And we can be grateful for that and find meaning and bearing in our life when we take the time to look at that.
Those are the whispers.
Those are the whispers.
Those are the whispers.
Yes.
Very often, after the brick, that's when we kind of wake up to the whispers and we say, I don't know why I didn't listen all this time. Okay. Yeah. But now I will. And now I'm going to go on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, thanks.
So tell me, what are you doing now? You're on a project now. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I started just before my son had passed, and for the last 8 years, I've been writing on a blog called Mitchell's Journey, which kind of chronicles our life experience and making sense of suffering. And it isn't all despondent. It's about, hey, this hard thing happened, but look what I've learned from it. And now I'm starting to shift my attention to this project called 1,000 Points of Light, which really was born on the night my son passed away. And that essay Nightfall that I have. So my hope is that as people begin to find a framework to look at the events in their life, they can start seeing connections that were before totally invisible to them. And when we start seeing the connections, I met Carly through my blog, and now I've met you, and you're a point of light to me because I think there's a lot I'll have to learn from you in the coming years as I listen to your podcasts and perhaps as we have other conversations. So Points of Light's really all about helping people step back from their life and recognize the good, the bad, the ugly, and draw the connections. And by the way, the one thing I've learned as I've done this work with people, I've been doing these workshops for the last 7 years, kind of testing out points of light. What does it mean? How can it help people? That often the hardest things we experience tend in retrospect to be the most profound and greatest blessings in our life. The loss of a job could put us in a totally new trajectory that in looking back was the best thing that ever happened to us. So I'm hopeful that this project can really give people the eyes to see things around them anew.
I'm sure it will. Wow. Oh my, I'm having a difficult time. This is my hardest interview I've done, by the way, but this was so worth it. I am so happy that I met you. And I'm sure my audience is going to, just follow you. All right. With the kind of hope that you have, it's just gonna, it's gonna fill them with hope, I think. And I think it'll give them a point of reference of, hey, my life's not so bad, and I think if we've done that, if you've done that, I think you've done what you were put here to do. All right. And that is to help people. And that's great. Um, so is there any other words of wisdom maybe that you want to share with my audience? A sentence, a motto, some advice, some sage advice?
Wow. I Carly once asked me to share some ideas on lessons, and I don't have lessons. I just have observations because I'm still such a student of life. But I think that I've learned personally that I benefit best when I lean into the hard things and examine instead of run from them. Look at the hard thing instead of asking, why me? I ask, what am I to learn from this? How can I take this hard thing to make me stronger, more compassionate, more discerning? And so that's perhaps the best tool I have for me is to lean into the things that hurt because they'll help us become something new.
That is great advice. Great advice. So now, if people want to get a hold of you, if they want to get involved in your project, maybe, or they just want to, they just want a shoulder to lean on, maybe. All right. Is there any way they can get a hold of you? Do you have a website, or do you have
Yeah, yeah, for sure. The two ways to get a hold of me, the two places I'm really active. One is my Mitchell's Journey blog. You just Google it, it'll be the first thing you see. And then also 1000pointsoflight.com, which is where I'm beginning this new work. And I think it's my life's work. It's where I'll be for a long, long time. And people can email me there at searching at 1000pointsoflight.com. And and there's, either site has an email catch so that you can send a message if you want to reach out to me. So
that's great. Chris, thanks so much for sharing your story with my audience. I'm sure you've touched the hearts of most, if not all, the people in my audience. Good luck going forward with your project. Keep up the good work. Keep inspiring people. You've totally inspired me. So you've been listening to Whispers and Bricks, and I'm your host, Ari Schonbrun. Until next time, listen to the whispers. Never give up on your dreams. Bye for now. Okay. Stop and go.